Out. I think we pretty much covered it with the extra room over there, but there are a few seats up front if anybody wants to jump up on the front row. We're having some technical difficulties with the video that we're getting figured out real quick, but at Common Cause, a lot of times we kind of like to know who our audience is, who's come to join us today. So I'd kind of like to run around the room real quick, and if you'll introduce yourself and let us know who you're with, we greatly appreciate that. So why don't we just start? Well, I'll start. Again, William Perry, Common Cause, Georgia. I'll toss it around this way.
Yeah, Vernon Strickland, resident of College Park, Atlanta Airport area.
Leilani Campbell, resident of Midtown.
Lucian Dillingham, NBC Concessions, operator of Concessions Food and Beverage at Hartsfield-Jackson.
I'm Christopher Daniel, also known online as @Journal Historian, and I'm a freelance reporter and cultural writer.
My name's Kevin Aycock, and I'm from Fayetteville, Georgia.
I have a mouthful of food.
We're trying to come up.
That's Jeff Dickerson,
Dale,
Dickerson
introduce me.
Communications.
Thank you.
And also on the Georgia gang. A brilliant PR practitioner, he wanted me to add.
Check your mail.
I'm Karen Swain, Smyrna, Georgia.
Sean Anderson, TRC Transportation.
There's a Markford Hill Airport Building.
Ron Slappy, SRC.
I'm Vic Bolton. I'm Kevin's neighbor in Fayetteville, and I'm a public relations communications practitioner.
Thomas Wilkins, Atlanta, Georgia.
Larry Livingston, Stone Mountain.
Thomas Wheatley, Creative Living.
Marie Jefferson, I'm Thomas Wheatley's wife, and new to Atlanta.
I'm Evan Solomon from Atlanta, and I'm with Common Cause Georgia as an intern.
Whitney Horton, Georgia State Senior, Common Cause intern.
Laura McNeil, and I'm in the neighborhood.
Murphy Talmadge.
Michael Sterling with the Mayor's Office in the City of Atlanta.
Go back there to the back. Kelly, why don't we start with you?
Kelly Jordan, Common Cause supporter in Atlanta. Bill Bozarth of Atlanta.
Hyatt Chaudhary, Atlanta Airport Superior Theatre, and chairperson of Atlanta Airport Superior Theatre.
I'm Noor Hussaini, I'm with Atlanta Hotels Financial Commission, also president of the Atlanta Airport Shuttle Association. Wallet with very good connection.
Zia Secondary, North Express Airport Shuttle.
All right, and we won't let this young lady off the hook that came in after we started the introduction.
Hi, I'm Ann Torres.
And where are you from? Or
Atlanta.
With Atlanta?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Well, again, thank you all for coming out. We've got in the back of the room some information that I'd love you to pick up on the way out. It tells you a little bit about Common Cause and who we are and what we do. If you like it, a chance to sign up and join as a member. And then beyond what we're talking about tonight, we're also very active down at the state capitol with ethics reform and that issue, which is coming to a head with the session ending on Thursday. There's cards where you can fill in the name of your senator and your representative and ask them to support ethics reform. If you detach those and return them to us, we'll deliver them to the state capitol for you tomorrow. So we'd love for you to check that out. The lovely Rachel in the back has that. And actually, you ought to introduce yourselves.
I'm Rachel. I'm communications coordinator at Common Cause Georgia.
I'm Wyatt Gore. I'm a board member for Common Cause Georgia.
And I'm Ryan. I'm the assistant director for Common Cause Georgia.
Excellent. Well, I think I've made everybody say who they are, so we'll go on from there. Again, thank you all for coming out. Common Cause, besides working on ethics, do a lot down with the city of Atlanta, down at City Hall. And we, like our slogan says, if you're looking at the information, our slogan's holding power accountable. And so we feel like it's our role to act as the citizens lobby, to ask the questions that people have and push on the issues that we feel need more public exposure. As we've consistently said, there's a lot, be it with the airport contracting process, with the new stadium, that needs a lot more openness, needs a lot more transparency, needs a lot more questions asked. And oftentimes, when we're pushing on those stories, at the same time, the media is also telling the story. but I think everybody knows kind of the state of media today, the competition, the breaking news, the 24-hour news cycle. Oftentimes you see a story, or perhaps you miss it, but they go by awfully fast. But there seems to be kind of a continuation of things happening, and things only get reported is if that story stays hot, or there isn't something else that happens. I remember one of the big issues with the stadium was finally announced, and it happened the same day as the new pope was appointed. So guess what was the back page story versus what was the front page story? So we try to find the things that tell the stories of what we're working on. And I've always kind of sat around after I've either read a newspaper article or seen a story on the television news, always thought, what would it be like to ask the reporter to be able to follow up on something, or if there was something in the story that you missed real quick or weren't clear on, what would it be like to be able to elaborate on that? So we wanted to put together these events to do just exactly that. We call it More to the Story, and are encouraged to hear perhaps from both sides of the issue exactly what is happening, what this is all about, where it's going, what happens next, that sort of thing. So that was the purpose of this event, and we hope to create this as a regular series where we look at a number of issues, where maybe there's a set of stories that are continuing to happen but might not get coverage, or might take a lull in their coverage and that kind of thing. So that's what we'll hopefully continue to do as we get other reporters and things like that involved. But I think we're extremely lucky to be able to kick this one off with Dale Russell, who is the senior I-Team reporter for Fox 5 News here in Atlanta. And, if you've been around Atlanta at all, you know a lot. There's not many stories that get by Dale, so this was an incredible opportunity. We're going to show basically the coverage of tonight and these transportation contracts down at the airport, but I first wanted to give Dale the opportunity to say a few things if you wanted to before we show your story.
Appreciate it. Thank you, William. I asked him earlier when I came here, I said, do you do this all the time with Common Cause? You have guests come in or reporters come in, and he said, no, it's our first time. So it should be an interesting test case here tonight to see how it goes. But give you a little bit of background here, that this is called down from a series of reporting that lasted over a year that is still going on now. These are stories that ran over various months during most of last year, beginning of the year, and some prior to that. We began, as many reporters did here in the city, with looking at the food concession contracts, a huge bid that was being put out by the city. It was absolutely groundbreaking in many ways, and the breadth and size of it. And we had people come to us very early on, raising questions about the process before the process was essentially even underway, which I thought was very intriguing and interesting to me, that how could you question what's going to happen before it happens. And during that time, essentially developed and laid a network of sources to cover the food concession bids as they unfolded, which we began to do. Our first story was about a large company, Delaware North, who messed up on their bid. All 5 of their bids could have been thrown out, and that was sort of the first story that got us into the food concession business. While we were looking at the food contract, we were told about what some people thought were questionable contractual situations and business situations going on in the ground transportation industry. And while we're trying to cover the food, we're also sort of shifted over there, and that's what we're going to show you tonight. I've brought 4 stories out of about, I would say, 14 or 15 that we did. I will apologize to you now. You're going to see in the television story, there's a lot of repetition from one story to the next. The people don't watch them the way you're going to watch them tonight. But I'll set it up with you. The first story, which actually took us months to put together, mainly because we have had in these stories and many stories like these, it's very difficult to get people to go on camera. We spend a lot of our time trying to convince people to talk to us even people that will go on the record, but that don't want to go on camera, because they're doing business, often, they're doing business with the city. And so they don't want to make the people mad who hold the purse strings that they're trying to do business with. The very first story that we'll show you here is ground transportation. It was a 5-year contract, which you'll see here in the story that had come to an end. And this is a story about what happened when that contract came to an end, the company that had had it for 5 years, and the company that ended up with the business, which is the focus of all these stories. The company is A National.
Story, actually, when did it actually air? This particular story?
This aired, I believe, in February of February of 2012.
Anyone else?
Did Daryl have anybody?
Testimony?
Yes. When you do this story, I know a lot about this because I was watching the lady. And why you even try to get in touch with us?
We did try to get in touch with you.
Outside.
We did try.
I never get a...
I left business cards down there with Tess. I called. I called other people.
You did it.
We tried. And we talked to Mr. Anderson and still talk to Mr. Anderson. Every time we have a question, Mr. Anderson will get on the phone and talk to me. We'd still like to talk to you.
Okay.
Jeff, you were asking a question.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if Daryl was, did you work with anybody with Daryl, or did he have any representative? Did he have a PR representative? Did he have anybody that you were
No,
with?
well, to my knowledge, he did not.
He did not.
If he had one, I didn't know about it.
Okay.
Daryl would always talk to us when we called him, still talks to me
Okay.
to this day when I call him. And every time we do a follow-up, we call.
For the sake of full disclosure, I actually handle communications for Mr. Anderson and for A National.
There you go.
Because I thought you were asking, did Daryl have any representation here, and that's why I asked you to finish your question. I'll make a couple of quick comments. There will be several throughout the night probably, but I want to clarify a couple of the details and I want to say, number one, Common Cause, I have a high lot of respect for what you do, and I understand the appropriateness of pursuing ethical behavior in all positions of power, and obviously, Bill, I've known you a long time. Here's the issue. Mr. Anderson was one of 7 companies that were summoned to the airport in anticipation of the termination of the contract of the previous vendor. Those companies were asked, could they provide a shuttle service on what you'd call an emergency basis, a few days away, as you mentioned, because they were deciding not to renew the relationship with the current vendor. Now, we have no concept as to why that decision was made. That's an airport or Winston Cooper or whoever decision. So I can't speak to that. But 7 companies were summoned to the airport to talk about taking this over on an emergency basis when they terminated that contract. Of those 7 companies, Mr. Anderson was one. And the thing they all had in common, some of them were vendors who already served with the existing provider. But all of them were permit holders, which is required to do business in and out of the Atlanta airport. At the time that they agreed to take on the service on an interim basis, the group decided that Mr. Anderson was the most experienced and the most knowledgeable and the former president of the Limousine Association and so on. And therefore, they asked him to take the lead on this company that they were forming to provide shuttle service. So the airport did not choose Daryl Anderson at all. The airport summoned 7 different companies, and the group of them decided that Daryl was the one who should lead the new venture.
Do you want me to respond, or?
Yes, sir, I will respond because it was, I received call 8:30 in the morning. I am this airport in 1992. And Winston Cooper called me 10:30, we have meeting, we choosing one company temporarily basis. So it was myself and Anderson was there. No other company was here, only represented here. We are more than 30 years over there. We are minority and we are American citizen. It was set up everything. Not every company was there. They say, okay, Two companies, myself, Superior Shuttle is paper right there. I have proved that. And Anderson. Anderson have no shuttle experience. We are 30 years over there. No experience. Anderson come from nowhere, we don't know where he come from. He was in a meeting right there. I was with Winston Cooper. So it was the group with old company. They voted, not those company, existing company, they didn't vote it. They voted, Anderson voted, that exactly it was set up. 8 o'clock you calling me and telling me your company Superior Shuttle will be there, and I run this after September 11, my company run, existing company, 9 companies, successful 9 months. It was set up, it was favorism, it was not voting, nothing. That's my response.
Actually, all the votes were brought by Mr. Anderson, and it was a fixed job by Mr. Cooper, so that's how the whole thing happened.
And I don't want to turn it too much into debate. Dale called for questions, and I think that would be appropriate.
Sir, I just answered back, because I was there.
Why don't we run through the stories, and then we can have the fuller discussion once we get through them.
Sir, I just answered back.
Okay.
And also, the file reflects that when the companies were brought in, we talked to every single owner of all of the companies. The file also reflects that the vote that you're talking about was set up for Daryl to be the manager of the operation. And that Daryl would not compete with these other companies. And when they voted with that understanding, that they would vote for Daryl to manage this contract as long as he did not compete with it. And the file reflects that, and all of the people that were in the vote reflect that. And I ask, for those of you who have not seen any of this before, just don't forget the name Winston Cooper. This is the second story that, while we were working on these simultaneously, while this business was turned over to Mr. Anderson, you'll see a little bit later on, this story sort of unfolded slowly. But we'll go to this since it's starting to run, and then we'll see if anybody has any questions. On a timeline, Mr. Anderson has gotten the shuttle business at the airport and then won the contract at the airport. He is working in business with the airport managers, Winston Cooper's uncle, by loaning him money and helping him finance a van for him to run an airport shuttle business. The basic reaction to that was there really was no reaction to it. Well, I take that back. I'm sorry. An investigation was opened up of Mr. Cooper by the city. Mr. Cooper is no longer with the city. He's left the city. Any questions?
Is he ever going to be prosecuted for any of the things he did?
Has he been? Prosecuted? No. There was an internal city investigation.
I think he was easy target, He was easy to, Well, who is the big shot is still there.
Do you know where Winston Cooper is now?
Not officially. I mean, I've heard things, but they're the kind of things that I've heard I haven't verified, so I don't know for sure that he's doing the things that I'm told that he's doing. He's still around. The next story, one of the things that we addressed with the city throughout all of these stories was the fact that this curbside management contract has oversight over ground transportation of the airport. And Daryl Anderson is running the shuttle service at the airport. There were a number of vendors, a number of them, that came to us and said that this is a conflict of interest. We think this is wrong. Story, and I'm sorry, but I can't remember the exact time frame at this point in time, but at some point after this report, to remove what the city felt was a conflict, the shuttle service that we first talked about that was not put out for bid at that point in time was later put out for bid. Our sources told us that Darrell Anderson had essentially won. He was the highest scorer, and that he would have won the bid if it had gone through the process with the city and the city attorneys and everything had been worked out. After the Recondo report came in, and during that point in time, the city canceled the bid and rebid it. And my sources from the city told me that they did it because of the perception that was created by Darrell Anderson winning this bid while he has this other contract. That has now been put out to bid and has been won by another company, though as presently, unless things have changed in the last few days, Mr. Anderson is still operating the shuttle service.
And we qualified with 13 company. We are experienced company working there 20, 30 years. Okay. Those companies they're going to award it. This company was not qualified. They said missing our paper. Then I went to City Hall. I went manuscript. They said paper missing. Then they said finally they find the paper. Paper was missing. 7 file paper was missing. So I said make in Office Max, same place. Okay? They don't want to give us. So who they give it? I don't know what's going on in more than 2 years.
Hi, this is the bid on the shuttle service.
Yes, sir. Same. We're talking about it. Finally, they find the paper back. They said no, it's late. So I don't know what's going on. They said.
I have a question. Where is this whole thing going now? Because I mean, based on what your sources are telling you that the shuttle contract has been put out for bid, and Mr. Anderson is no longer able to bid on the contract. So where are we going with this story now? Because I mean, technically, right now he has the.
You sound like my boss.
Huh?
You sound like my boss.
I mean, this whole thing has been in a box.
Right.
Now we outside the box now.
No, it's a good question, and the answer to it is that at some point in time, and unfortunately because of other demands, I haven't had the time yet, we will review the bid process of this latest bid, just like we did when we did the first story. I went down to the city and read the entire bid file on both of those contracts. And there's a wealth of information in this. As long and complicated as our stories are, we leave out so much. It's just amazing because there's just too much out there. You can't put it all into a 5-minute story. But short answer is that we'll go down there, we'll look through the bid process, and we'll look for any kind of irregularities, which we saw in some of the other bids, and see if they were handled properly. But you really don't know until you go through the file, and at that point in time, we'll decide, make a determination whether there's a story there or not, or it's in a sense all over with.
And next
Which
time,
it may be.
we need to get you a couple new ties too, because that tie was in the video.
Yeah, I like this. And you never know what will come up. I mean, Edmund Hendricks, we had no idea. The uncle, who had all these links right in the middle of the story that we were doing, we didn't know he was going to show up.
And you know,
Or hear about him. Actually track him down.
What I'm saying is, you know, you interviewed a lot of different people. There was Mr. Cooper, there was his uncle. And then I hear about the other shuttle contractors that all met in this large group. And it was determined, or Mr. Anderson was voted as the lead to manage the shuttle service. I mean, you don't have no piece in there where you met with any other shuttle owners, but this gentleman here, the one that was just sitting here, yeah, this gentleman here. So, I mean, what happened to the other 4 or 5 other shuttle companies? And then I understand this gentleman right here said he used to work with the lady. So,
right.
You know, where was they in the whole scheme of things during the interviewing process?
We talked to a lot of people that don't want people to know we talked to them.
Okay.
If that will make sense. And then we also often try to talk to people who don't respond to us. We don't, unfortunately, the framers of the Constitution did not give us subpoena power. So if I call you and ask you to comment or talk to me and you don't want to, there's not a whole lot I can do about it. So in answer to your question is, I can't tell you who we talked to if they didn't want to appear in the story or did not want people to know I had talked to them.
Yeah,
But I can tell you that we were thorough.
Were they credible people? That's the question.
The other business owners?
Yes.
They are permitted, legal, operating businesses in this city. They're credible enough for the airport to allow them to work.
Anyone else?
Dale, let me do this for the benefit of your question there.
Go ahead.
It won't completely satisfy your inquiry as to where it is. But if one having been subjected to a similar type of circumstances where I was denied of the award of a contract that we basically knew that we had won. At one point in time, when you take into consideration the legal costs that it takes out of your pocket to confront the city, you've got to make a business decision that if you protest or you appeal and you win, there's nothing that prohibits the city from taking that bid and putting it back out on the street and awarding it to the same person that you appealed against. That is a situation which happened with my company in the food and beverage deal, where we knew we won. We were advised when the city came to us and said, we'll give you X dollars to go away. And we were advised by our attorney to accept the money to defray the costs that we had incurred in bidding. And here I sit, because I had to make a business decision. I can't fight the city. That may be some of the reasons why some of these people make a business decision. It's too big, it's too well planned.
I mean, I think I can say Lily Santander. I think I spent somewhere between 2 and 3 months trying to convince her to talk to us on camera. Could have done that story 2 or 3 months earlier, but you can't do that story without link. There are a lot of people that don't want to publicly get into the fray, and there are a lot of people that, as Lucian is saying, there's all kind of legal complications, and there's also people that still want to do business with the city and they don't want to make anybody mad.
You have to also add to that, Dale, that, as you know, being on camera is a very daunting thing for those who are accustomed to it.
Yes.
So a lot of the time, people who are reluctant to appear on camera are fearful of being made to look like a fool on camera. They aren't always necessarily up to something they're trying to hide or not wanting to be discovered or whatever. So to be fair, a lot of people, I do media training as part of my craft.
Right.
And a lot of people are very reluctant to, when the lights come on, the nerves and the heart rate and the system stop functioning, and a good reporter can make you look like Boo Boo the Fool on camera. So a lot of people are very reluctant to be interviewed, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that person is, trying to hide something.
Right. Anyone else?
In any of
Thomas?
listed.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
Dale, you put a lot of emphasis on the friendship with the mayor of Atlanta and Darrell Anderson. Have you found anything unethical, factual that Darrell Anderson and his day-to-day operation, has he done anything unethical? Have you reported anything, have you found anything from the city's point of view?
On either one of the shuttle service?
The shuttle
or the
or curbside
contract?
management. Have you found anything unethical that Darrell Anderson has done?
That we have not reported anything.
Have you found anything in
We've
your
not
reports?
reported anything. On either side, the contract or the shuttle business.
Can I answer for that, sir? Not debate, then I answer that. Okay.
I don't know how you can answer that.
Wrap it up like that.
Well, you're not there, we are there. I am chairperson of Shuttle Association. This gentleman we have talked to, I'm not talking directly, I respect him. Curbside management is there. This employees come telling us how to control our business, how to manage. Curbside management telling them go to their shuttle to travel with them, not with us. Actually, we like this handcuff. So they're controlling both things.
And that's the
Yes, sir.
complaint that was lodged in the
Yes, sir.
story.
1 million
about
people
why they
coming,
thought it
couple
was-
million, I don't know.
Dale, curbside management is working for Daryl Anderson. And Daryl Anderson has his own shuttle booth where they sell tickets. Just guess where the people get directed.
That's his conflict.
And I think that was the
Nobody
issue that was
listens to us,
raised,
but
that
it's
was
okay.
the issue that the Rincondo report looked at. And the city felt that by taking away the opportunity to win the shuttle contract, they removed that conflict.
Yes, sir.
And I know some people some people in the industry aren't necessarily happy with that or necessarily agree with it. But that was the city's position, and how they felt that they could resolve that potential conflict or appearance of a conflict.
Well, I would be interested in your source with the city.
Which one?
The source that you had that actually says that the contract's been bid and someone else is.
I'm sure you would.
Good luck at that.
Right.
Thomas, did you go?
I can tell you this, it is an absolute accurate representation of what I was told.
In your reporting, did you find or did anyone suggest ways that these kinds of conflicts of interest or potential conflicts of interest could be avoided? Did anybody suggest any kind of reform or change in practices that could have been done?
In these particular contracts or contracts down the road?
Down the road. Like, is there anything, did they offer anything that could be learned from this? Like, you know, moving forward, you could try a different type of system to prevent from this happening.
I don't remember that being offered. There is a conflict of interest provision in the city contract that all the vendors, I'm pretty sure it's standard in all the city contracts. The vendors would sign if they believe that they have a conflict of interest for the city to then review or investigate. So that's in place right now in all city contracts that are let. How often that's utilized, I can't tell you.
I've got a question. Just from looking at these pieces, it seems like your whole angle, I guess, with your work was around the relationship that Mr. Anderson had with the mayor, Kasim Reed. And then I think I saw in a piece that the mayor mentioned that he was like 14 years old when Mr. Anderson, had his contract at the airport. So is the issue that you have around the relationship, if he didn't have a relationship with the mayor, would this be a story for you? Or I'm trying to understand
It would be a different
what your
story.
angle was, or is rather.
Well, you're talking about a businessman who came down to the airport and got a multi-million-dollar business without a bid, without an RFP, without even a written contract. So that alone is going to bring reporters' interest. How did this happen? It's a fair question in any scenario like that. When you add to it that person is a family friend, lifelong friend by both sides' accounts, and the whole family, brothers, sisters, the daughter, and that on top of that, they're also business partners. I don't know how a reporter could avoid that in the reporting of that story. I think any reporter would be remiss if they left that out in telling the story about what happened with this shuttle business contract and this ground transportation contract.
Okay,
And especially the combination of the two, which led to the issue of the conflict that was raised that has now been resolved by the city.
So let's say hypothetical, he didn't have a relationship with the mayor, Mr. Anderson didn't.
That he didn't?
That he did not. And the same thing applied, that this wasn't a bid and it, you know, the story unfolded the same way, but he wasn't a family friend or whatever of the mayor. So what type of story would this be then for you?
That's a good question. In terms of the investigative part of it or at the end of it?
Just in general. What kind of story would this be for you if you didn't have a relationship with him?
With the set of facts that we were looking at in the beginning, this new company, well, not new company, but this company came in and took over this business under the circumstances that we talked about and reported, I would still be interested in it. I would go down and look at that file because I would want to answer the question, why did they do this? Why did they drop Link? They didn't have to. And the city admits that. They did. It's a decision that they made for a variety of reasons.
And what were those reasons? Because that's one of the things, another thing I was going to ask is, we never heard, this story started with the, what's the lady's name? Your story started with Lily Santander saying that, you know, that this contract was basically snatched away from her, you know, at moment's notice.
That's right.
But it didn't give any history on what happened. So I would be curious as to...
Now, we talked about that there were problems with the MBEs on the contract.
On the story?
Yes.
Right, it did mention.
Okay.
And that they were back, they owed money. That was also another issue, though they were starting to pay it back. So it was in there, and we looked at it, and I read the entire file, and I would be more than happy if you would read the entire file as well. And bear in mind that one of the key players in that file, in the writing of the file, in the writing up of the information that is turned over to the superiors at the airport, is Winston Cooper. So everything you're reading from Winston Cooper. You know who he is.
My experience with these kinds of stories is that if there isn't an acknowledged, stated relationship between the parties, you start looking at other evidence or interrelationships where there is an attempt to establish a relationship with an official, for instance, through campaign contributions or things of that sort. I mean, we've done lots of those stories over the years at the AJC. I was with the AJC for 17 years before.
Right, that's why I was asking,
So,
is this about the relationship?
Even in the absence of two parties acknowledging that they have a relationship, a reporter ordinarily would go and see if there is some other reason why this person may have won that contract without a competitive process. Thomas, I'm sure you'd do the same thing.
Yeah, I'm doing it now. Researching.
And you try to answer that question. What is going on in this scenario? Or what does the relationship mean in this scenario? I mean, they're hard questions. These are not easy. There are all kind of permutations to this that in a different setting and a different time I would love to talk about. But it was in some ways a tough story. And it also was tough for us because it was ignored essentially the rest of the city. So we were sort of out there all alone.
Bill, did you ever report any facts on the conflict of interest between curbside management and the other transportation service? I know it was stated it was with the evaluating team. It was based on perception, but were there any factual statements on the conflict of interest?
I'm not sure from whom. Factual statements
on the conflict of interest between curbside management and the other transportation services that you brought up in your story?
Are you talking about the allegations from the other company owners?
Yes, the company owners and also the evaluating team that put together a comprehensive study based on, in their comprehensive study, they said it could be a conflict of interest based on perception.
Are you talking about the Recondo report?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we covered that.
Did you find anything or report anything factual based on the conflict of interest?
We reported on what the Recondo report found.
Okay, what did you find factual in your report?
What would be factual was their findings, which was turned over to the city.
Well, their findings was based on perception that it could be a conflict of interest.
Right. I believe that's the phrase they use.
But there was nothing actually reported factual. Okay, if you're going to state it's a conflict of interest, you're gonna put A, B, C, D, why it's a conflict of interest. And that's fair to say?
Yes, and as I recall, the Recondo report did that.
So is it a conflict of interest or not? What it could be? Was it one or wasn't it one?
Well, Dale, if I could jump in,
two
because
things.
the story reported and the quote was a perceived, if not a real conflict of interest. So it not only said a perceived conflict, but it said a real conflict.
If not a real. It said if not a real. So it's a perception thing. Right? I mean, let's just be real about it. What is it? Is it a perception or not? Is it a conflict of interest or not?
According to the report, and I don't remember the exact phrasing, but it was something to the effect of a perception of.
Okay, it was a perception. Okay.
Yes, and
so it's not they did not find a conflict of interest. They found a perception of a conflict of interest.
I think that's accurate.
Okay, that's what this question was about.
I think I know where you're going to go.
Well, you may not. I interpret his question a little differently, in that I think he was asking, where did these people actually misbehave? And I believe the answer to that might have been in at least the allegations of the other shuttle owners, who implied in the story that they were referring the passengers in an unfair way.
Oh,
Wasn't
okay,
there some of that at least?
Yes.
That's an allegation, that's not necessarily proof, but
Yes.
I think that answers the question.
Mr. Anderson told us it did not happen. He did not believe that those allegations were true. Yeah, there were a number of allegations from not only the limousine owners, but also shuttle owners about mistreatment, some of which ended up in the story at the hands of curbside management, if that's what you're asking. And on the perception issue, and we deal with this a lot, we do a lot of conflict of interest stories. Ethicists will tell you, and I have interviewed dozens of them, that the perception of a conflict is every bit as damaging or real as an actual conflict. And I don't think you could find, which is why Recondo puts it in something, language like that in the report, and why it's serious, and why ultimately the city made the decision that they're going to remove this potential conflict.
So why didn't they call it a conflict of interest? Why did they use the term perception if it's a conflict of interest?
You would have to ask the authors of that report.
Of course.
Why
right.
they.
So that's the reason.
I can't speak for Recondo.
I understand. I'm not asking you to do that. So that's the reason why they removed or basically ruled, for lack of a better term, that Mr. Anderson could not bid on that contract was because of the perception of the conflict of interest.
That's what we were told.
Okay.
And reported.
I hate to keep stealing your time because I'm not asking questions, I'm making comments. Is that okay?
It's
shut up.
Free forum. Have at it.
I just want to add a little context to a couple of these timing issues, if I may.
Sure.
You reported in the story inaccurately, so that the arrangement, even if the way that Mr. Anderson was elected is in dispute, or if whether he was to operate or just manage, whatever, that it was a temporary arrangement because of the fact that the city decided to stop its relationship with Link. Is that fair?
Yes.
It was a temporary arrangement. Okay. I think
Still
we have
going
to,
on. But it was
yes,
temporary.
and that's where I'm going next. And I think we have to be very careful to not make the great leap from what a thing looks like and or what can be human error or incompetence to direct impropriety. There is no evidence that, for example, the mayor made a referral or a phone call or sent an email. It's an assumption that because they're friends, that possibility exists. Is where we went. And so, is it not correct that the last two companies to manage the shuttle service prior to the current relationship went out of business or filed bankruptcy or something to that effect? Is that not correct? That's my
The
understanding.
last two, so you're talking Link.
And then the one that was prior to Link 5 or 6, 8 years ago.
Not the airport shuttle.
Okay, my understanding was that,
You know, I don't think I ever went back 8 years to the company before Link.
well,
I've heard some things during all this, but
I'm
it's-
trying to add
it's nothing I
context
never looked
because
at.
when you say multi-million-dollar, everybody goes, woo. But if you're in a dress shop and you make $1 million and you buy $1.1 million worth of dresses, you're upside down. And so what I'm saying to you is that this, while there may have been $1 million flowing, that does not mean anybody made $1 million. My understanding is that that is a losing contract in terms of the month-to-month logistical operation of it, that it actually costs more to operate than it brings in revenue. So even though it may be $100,000 a month or whatever it comes to, that's my understanding, that it actually is not a lucrative contract at all.
I have heard that. I don't know.
Okay.
I have no personal knowledge of any of them.
Okay, let me finish the thought and
I
I'll
do
shut
know
up.
this.
Yes,
There were
Can I
a
jump
lot
in?
of people who wanted that contract.
You're right.
Can I jump in with a question real quick, just to clarify? So the story says that it's a no-bid contract, it's handled without an RFP and with a temporary basis, and you both just said that it's still going on. So what's the time frame that it's been since it's happened and why?
Fall
2
of
years.
2010,
2 years
And
and
it's
change.
still considered a,
and it's not a contract.
yeah, it's
There
not,
is-
okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
And for clarity's sake, it's clear that I represent Mr. Anderson. There are other players in this conversation. There are the Coopers, there's the uncle, there's the city and the procurement folks and all of that. And my concern is that it appears that we are painting Mr. Anderson with the brush of impropriety when there may or may not be human error and or other issues in this equation that you may or may not have chosen to report or may not have been corroborated yet or whatever. But it does not mean that Mr. Anderson is operating inappropriately or that there was impropriety in the way that the situation was awarded. Now, he wanted and chose to pursue the curbside management contract because his perception was that that was the more attractive of the two options, okay, from the beginning. The city was also opening up the international terminal and bidding and rebidding and, of course, opening up all of the concessions contracts at the airport during the same time frame. So what it appears to me is that the bidding of this shuttle contract that was promised when they took over on a temporary basis got lost in the cloud while the city tried to make its timelines and deadlines for getting the international terminal open and getting those bids awarded, which of course had their own complications, which is really what started this whole process. This is an offshoot of the beginning discussion about concessions that then boiled over into what else is going on at the airport that may or may not be perceived correctly. So I just wanted to make that point clear that Mr. Anderson took this thing over on a temporary basis under the assumption that within a short time frame the city was going to let it for bid. Mr. Anderson continued to operate it because he agreed to do so, basically in good faith as a favor to the city, so the shuttle service wouldn't stop or whatever when they shut down the predecessor. His intention was to bid the curbside management, which he did, but it was not his desire to own or to seek or to maintain the shuttle contract over a long haul. He has continued to do it because the city has yet to bid it and fully award it, and there's another vendor in play when they do that.
But he bid for it when they put it out for bid.
He did. Now,
I mean,
I'm hearing two different stories here because my conversations with Mr. Anderson indicate that he was given the impression that he would be allowed to bid it when it came out. That is what he shared with me. Now, I realize you have done your work and you've done way more work than I. But Mr. Anderson gave me the impression that the conversations he had when he first took over temporarily was that you may bid when we let the contract. And I think subsequent to that, somewhere in all of the contracting and so forth that goes on in procurement, no one thought about the fact that there was the shuttle contract and the curbside management contract in play at once, and that those two could be or could give off a perception of a conflict. Because, even though Mr. Anderson is my client, I can objectively see that the curbside management organization manages airport transportation, of which the shuttle is a piece. So it doesn't take a genius to say you could perceive that to be, or it could be a real conflict. So that's what the city's action was a few months ago when it said anyone with one of these can't bid on the other.
Right.
Sir, actually, the contract city for share ride shuttle in airport is 2-year option. It's more than 2.5 year temporary basis, Mr. Anderson still running. So temporary basis 2.5 year. So 3 year is contract, 2-year option to extension.
And do you know when MTI takes over?
I do not. I understand it's in the works, but I haven't. I think there's a contract pending that needs execution or something like that.
Is there no one here from the city's contracting office that can possibly answer that?
We don't get involved in the contracting process itself. It doesn't hit the mayor. I'm from the mayor's office, but it doesn't hit the mayor's desk until it's gone through procurement, gone through city council, and the first time the mayor sees it is when it's on his desk for signature.
All right, well, it's 8:30, which is our ending time. I thank you all again for coming out. I think this turned out much more interesting than I even possibly imagined. So I hope it's something we can continue to do with different stories and different news outlets. If Dale doesn't mind us throwing in a little competition, that sort of thing.
And I welcome any of you to call, story ideas, or if you don't like the story I'm doing, feel free to call. I'll be glad to have a dialogue with anyone on either side of that fence at any point in time. And I appreciate you guys coming out.
Thanks for giving us opportunity.
Thank you. So if y'all know, thank you. From Common Cause, again, we try to be the citizens lobbyists, we try to be the government watchdog group, so if there's anything you think we should be working on, if you'll let us know about it, and also take a look again at our registration form, both about ethics and how you can join Common Cause. Thank y'all very much for coming out.